and time and all of that.
Matt, have you ever thought you'd like to be an esports competitor?
In the sort of like, where you look at something like, well, Victoria Corin Mitchell with poker, you just say she made $1 million from one game. So can't I just sit in that game table and do that? But no, it's one of those. I like stories. I've never cared about competitive stuff, really, not in gaming. Thinking about, I listen to a podcast called Crime in Sports, which is about criminal athletes, and they are monsters, utter monsters. It's unbelievable. And a lot of them, well, a certain number of them deal with molestation of athletes, particularly younger athletes. So just because esports is based on computers, it has all of the dangers of any other kind of sport. If you're traveling somewhere, if you're in an environment that is male dominated, that is run by gatekeepers who have the power to say, they're not really a good team player, we'll choose the girl who doesn't say anything when I sexually abuse them. So that's again, it's important to recognize the dark sides of all these things with gaming that, like you were saying, Jem, that the world, just because it's gaming, it doesn't make it any different from the way the rest of the world works.
Yeah, I mean, that's all true, but $10 million really does appeal. But of course, I'd never win it because I just like to have fun when I'm playing games. I mean, I love Hearthstone, which is the closest I come to playing one of the esport games out there. And even then, like, I get criticised heavily because I play it for fun. I'm not constantly worrying about having the best deck, looking up strats. I just play for fun. I don't mind that I lose a lot. That's not what it's about for me. Alex, how about you? Does it appeal to you, the idea of playing in an esports competition, being an esports god of some sort?
In the same way as when I watch a quiz on TV and I get the answer right, I'm thinking, well, if I was there, I'd win this much money. So, yeah, in the same way as Matt said, really. But again, I think if there were games that I played and ways of playing those games in a competitive way, I would probably be more tempted. But again, I don't know. I haven't ever thought about it in a serious way because of.
I realise now that what I actually did was rudely interrupt Alex at this point, just to raise the bugbear that I'd wanted to mention, which was the British Esports logo, which is a lion with a stern, serious face, whereas the British Esports women's logo is
much like the Olympics.
Indeed, is a lioness. And the lioness has her mouth open and this sort of really whiny, naggy look on her face, whereas the lion has this sort of stern, serious face. So that's what I'm doing right now there, is the whiny, naggy face sort of thing, compared to the stern, serious face of the British esports lion.
They just can't help it. They can't help it. Every single time there's this new thing. Oh, we'll see how it turns out. And they always go, we just had a little bit of sexism in there. Can't help it.
And I can't remember at which point I said this during the show, but I'm filling it in this gap, is that people really often talk about the need for mentors for women and creating a women's space, when in reality it's the men that need mentoring, and it's the spaces that already exist with men in them that need to change. So rather than sort of siphoning women off to have their own lioness symbol, you need to question why it is that women don't want to be in the main esports game, because it's not usually women, it's usually just marginalised communities. Anyway.
No, I was interrupting you. I think that you've hit the nail on the head. I think the issue is that the system needs to change, and that's why we're gaming the system, because the system needs to change, because the system is fundamentally flawed. And what it always comes down to whenever organizations try to fix it is actually what they do is they say it's the women's fault. It's the minority group's fault. It's, this is why there's not enough of this group in our business, is because they aren't confident enough to step forward and ask for a raise or ask for that job or to join in those games. They don't want to look at the fact that the system is rigged against these groups of people, because it has been designed for and by men, and they run it, and they want to keep it that way, intentionally and unintentionally. And I think that's the thing. It's fundamentally flawed, I think, and that's a much bigger fix. That's a much harder fix, isn't it, to sit down and go, like you say, why don't women want to work for this company? Why don't women want to play in esports?
Is it about these esports games that mean they are not the sort of games that we play or that women play? Why are these games just not welcoming to newcomers, just not something that you kind of want to dive in at?
For me, it's just I get motion sick, actually. It's probably the biggest problem. I find the first person shooters really difficult to do. I mean, I did actually play Quake through. Quake is one of the few games that I did actually finish back in the olden days. And, you know, but that was about the only first person that I really was able to cope with. And then it got too fast, and I think the other problem is that if you play in environment where you've got like other players attacking you or whatever, it's very difficult to learn because you're dead all the time. I mean, that was what happened to me when I would log in to play these games, or if I did PvP or anything like that in World of Warcraft, I would just die all the time, and I never got it. Just wasn't fun. It wasn't. I think for me, it's always been story-based games has been something that appeals to me, and these games do not. But I can see why people might quite like to watch them, because there's a lot going on and there's a lot of action. So I can see the appeal for some people in it. But for me, extreme violence, gratuitous violence, no story, I just find it frustrating, and I don't find it fun. But I have known and loved many people who have found it a lot of fun. So I'm not knocking it. It just doesn't work for me.
I actually find that because I've always been okay with being terrible at actual sport, I'm kind of okay with being terrible at esports, and the constant losing and getting killed doesn't actually get me down all the time. But I mean, equally, it doesn't endear me to a game if you just keep losing every time you like go into it, and it doesn't make you want to keep going with it. So no, I totally see that argument, and I can understand why, especially your sort of Fortnite games and stuff, if all you're doing is just getting shot instantly, you're not going to want to play much more.
Well, for me, mainly it's a chip on my shoulder, like I have with games that want credit for having a female protagonist when they give you the choice to play as either a male or a female protagonist. It's that online games, massive open world games, and games like Destiny, they're cop-outs because they're not creating a story, they're not creating a narrative to hang the quality of the game on. They create a gameplay loop, go, here you go, do this loop, and then the players create their own like enjoyment, rather than going, I've built this 40-hour epic God of War story, and you will experience this, and every single impression you have of it will be because of something that we've created. So that's why I've never really. That's why it irritates me a bit. As far as another reason why women might be deterred from those kinds of places, because the loudness and proudness of the angry, aggressive, cruel male presence that is so widely strewn over every area of the internet, that if you think, oh, I like to play Call of Duty, if you want to be the best, the absolute best at something, you need to be able to go into it and give it your all the time. But if you know in the back of your head that if I go online here and try and organise with one of my friends, there's probably going to be some dickhead in the chat who's going to call you a stupid bitch, or say he wants to find your house and rape you. If you've got that in the back of your head, then that has to do something, even if it's not conscious. It's going to chip away your love of wanting to pursue that thing, because that's what happens to women in any walk of life. They say, you want this thing, you've got to fight through in that system in order to get to what you want. You can't just stop. You can't get there without having to go through the swamp that exists there already and the swamp creatures that inhabit it.
Alex, do you agree?
Yeah. No. Well, I think when I think about first-person shooters, they don't generally appeal to me because they stress me out quite a lot. The one experience I've had of hearing online chat was actually in GTA 5, when it just automatically did it when you go into online mode unless you turn it off. And I just was like, oh God, no, there's loud strangers in my ears. It just freaked me out and scared me, and I just didn't feel very comfortable. It felt like an invasion of privacy in some ways. But no, in terms of first-person shooters, I also don't like the feeling of knowing there's an actual human behind the other person that's attacking you. It feels not. It always feels personal in a way, even though it's, well, I suppose it is personal because they are trying to kill you. But and then also, what was the other thing? I don't like losing, and I'm not very good. I'm not very good at first-person shooters. So like I say, I usually die all the time or only kill one person. And when I see myself at the bottom of the table, I don't feel very good. And I want to play games that I enjoy playing. And those aren't the types of games that I enjoy.
I think what happened here is that I went on yet another rambling anecdote about Rust, because I can't avoid bringing it up all the time, but also I'm probably like the only person who plays these sort of games out of the group. I am rubbish at PvP, but I get a lot of fun out of the game by playing it my way. And the heightened tension you get playing Rust, even on like a really quiet server, where you're thinking, right, I'm out chopping down a tree or just gathering some stone, but at any moment you could lose all your gear and have to just defend yourself or, you know, run away really fast, jump on a horse. But it just gives an adrenaline rush that I have never had from any other game or any other experience online like that. But yeah, no, I am rubbish at PvP, which is why I tend not to take my good gear out with me, which is probably why I lose anyway. But, you know, bow and arrow and some burlap sack clothes, don't feel too bad about losing those.